I know some of you are familiar with this ceremony, perhaps some of you are not. I think this is a wonderful time to talk about the Hungry Ghost ceremony, given what is going on in the world right now, because the teaching of this ceremony is so helpful. And that's what I'm hoping to talk about today. Hungry ghost karma is the karma of greed, and greed is fed by delusion. And we are seeing some serious manifestations of both of these attitudes of mind on a global level at this time. Our spiritual leaders are telling us that the state of the environment is the consequence of collective greed. Religious, racial, political, and social upheavals are based on delusions of inadequacy, of fear, of scarcity, of being left out, of the feeling that there isn't enough to go around. And I would say to appreciate this ceremony, we need to keep in mind that we are finding that which is greater than the opposites. We're finding the place beyond the opposites that includes everyone and everything. So I would suggest that you not try to approach this ceremony with the intellect. This is a pretty complicated ceremony. But I would say to if you want to appreciate what is going on with it, I would trust what brought you to the practice and use that as your springboard for getting a sense of what this ceremony is about. I used to come to this ceremony every year. I came year after year. I was absolutely clueless as to what it was about until shortly after I became a monk, I was asked to help prepare for this ceremony, and specifically to prepare the altar. Now, some of you who have been to the Abbey during a Sagaki retreat know that we spend a good deal of time in the kitchen preparing food to put on the altar. And so you know what I mean when I'm talking about. What I want to do is describe some of what is going on the altar and talk about the teaching of that. And I think some of you, or perhaps all of you, got an email with a description that is in the lay liturgy book. You know, the lay liturgy book has a whole lot of teaching in it, in the description of the ceremonies, which most people, you know, don't think to read because it looks kind of boring and detailed and all, but I really sat myself down with it and took a good look at what it was that was being talked about, and it's quite a wonderful thing. So again, this ceremony is a huge memorial and a transfer of merit ceremony for all those who have died recently, and in particular people who have died in difficult or violent circumstances, such as suicide, accidents, murder, anyone who has died in an unquiet state, a disturbed state, despairing states of mind, and left behind something that is not at rest. So again, just to briefly mention that the hungry ghost inhabits one of the 6 realms. The 6 realms in Buddhism are the human realm, the realm of the devas, the realm of the asuras, the animals, the hells, and the hungry ghosts. The hungry ghost is constantly hungry but cannot take in food, cannot eat, and is in a constant state of craving. And actually, it's a state of spiritual malnutrition. So when we talk about ghosts, it can sound a little bit woo-woo. Here it is Halloween. There's a lot of ghosty stuff around. We think about haunted houses. We think about something that is not at rest. And on a collective scale, this sense of things not being at rest is really quite palpable. People often will talk about having experienced this in a place where there has been a lot of suffering, such as animals being slaughtered, or the land has been exploited, or there's been sites of murder, and there is a sense of something left over that needs to be set, given peace and set to rest. And, as we know, there are all kinds of movies and stories that have been made about this. And Buddhism gives us practices to help put this karma, this disturbed energy, to put it to rest. And this ceremony is one of the ways that this can be done. Now, we can ask ourselves, okay, but what does this have to do with me? We often say this isn't about me, but actually this is about me. This is about us, and it is about the hungry ghosts, because there is something here that is being shared, and it is karma that needs to be put at rest. This ceremony is for that karma, no matter who it belongs to. And so the fact is that we all have hungry ghost karma, and if we look within ourselves, we will be able to see it, I would say, sooner rather than later. And the teaching of this ceremony helps us see what to do about it. Now, as I mentioned, hungry ghost karma is the karma of greed. And the thing is that greed is pretty hard to talk about, because we don't like to think of ourselves as greedy. The three poisons in Buddhism are greed, hate, and delusion. And a lot of us find it much easier to look at our anger or look at our delusions than we do to look at our greed. Reverend Master Jiu used to help us with this, because I remember early on, as I've told you, many of you, I went to her lectures for years when I was a lay trainee, and she was lecturing at UC in Berkeley, and many of us went to hear her. That's how a lot of us met her. And one of the first things that I remember her saying is, we all have a healthy swatch of greed, hate, and delusion. And then she'd get this big smile on her face to let us know that it was really okay, because we all have it. And this is what we come with. And this is what we're working with. So the hungry ghost karma manifests itself as chronic dissatisfaction, always looking outside of ourselves for something that's going to satisfy this inner longing. And nothing is enough. Nothing really satisfies it, because actually it's a spiritual longing. It's a longing for the eternal. It's a longing that we have to know our own Buddha nature and to be in touch with it. So we can say, well, what's in the way? What's in the way of that? So that's what I'd like to start talking a little bit about, what is in the way and how the ceremony helps us. And I want to look in the liturgy of that from which this ceremony is described, to talk about what goes in, some of what goes into preparing the altar, and the teaching behind what it is we are doing. So, when we come to Sagaki, we're actually lending our voices and our hands and ourselves to help the unquiet karma, no matter whose it is. And the way that we can help when we come to the ceremony is just by fully participating in it. Whether or not we understand all of it, we understand enough to be able to join in recitations and to join in the spirit of it. And the celebrant is acting on our behalf and expresses our wishes and makes herself a vehicle for the teaching. So Reverend Master Mayon tomorrow will be the celebrant for the Sagaki ceremony, and she will be celebrating this on our behalf. And meanwhile, I want to talk about some of what happens. Now, first of all, the Hungry Ghost altar is put into the Buddha hall. This is a different altar than the main altar, and this is the first thing that we know because the belief is that if the Hungry Ghost altar is close to any altar upon which there is a statue of a Buddha or Bodhisattva, the ghosts will not come near it. The ghosts are afraid to approach the altar because of their feeling of inadequacy. Now, one of the first things that we find out is that in the Buddha hall, all the windows and the doors are open. I remembered this vividly because it was a lot colder back then than it is now, but it didn't matter because Reverend Master Ji would throw open all the doors and windows, take all the screens out of the windows. The point is there is no obstruction to the ghosts, okay? There's nothing in the way of their coming in the hall. This is really important for us to remember about our own training. There is no obstruction. There is nothing in the way. Anything that is in the way is something that we ourselves are putting there. And this is where the sense of inadequacy comes in. So, but this is actually one of the greatest compassion ceremonies in all of Buddhism, because we start where the hungry ghosts are. The windows are open. They don't want to be near the altar where the Buddha is, so we put in another altar. We put in the hungry ghost altar, and we decorate it with things that we feel will be helpful to them with their sense of inadequacy and impurity. So the Hungry Ghost altar is full of tiny dishes of different kinds of food, and this is why. Let's see. Thank you. Hang on here a second. I've lost my place. Well, also the other altar, any other altars are covered up. There is a piece of gauze screen that goes over the main altar, and it says, all other altars other than the Hungry Ghost one should be left without undue decoration and lighting, and be as far as possible from the Hungry Ghost altar as stated above. The Hungry Ghost altar should be given the utmost decoration and attention. And food and vegetables of all kinds are prepared and put in tiny dishes and small dishes. Every kind of fruit and cooked vegetable and liquids varying from thick soup to juliennes. Hot and cold tea should also be prepared. Everything vegetarian found on, in, and above the earth shall be represented. There's an incredible offering of food to the Gakis, and the other, this also represents the spiritual food that is being offered. Then the main dish is something is a treat, and it's always something that is popular. And the feeling is that this is going to be appealing to most gakis and to most people as well. It's interesting, in England there would always be cream buns. In this country, Reverend Master Jiu thought we didn't know too much about cream buns, but what about donuts? So she used to like to put donuts on the altar. I was talking to Reverend Valora, our cook, who was making special cookies yesterday, and I asked her about what she was making, and she said she was making shortbreads, and they have coconut. She was hoping that the smell of the coconut would attract the gakis, and then there's this beautiful dab of red jam in the middle of each one that looks just like a little jewel, and she was hoping that that also would be enticing. So there are also small wooden tubs on short legs because it is thought that some gakis may have mouths that are can only slurp. So here are these huge tubs that they can slurp up whatever is being offered. And the reason that there are so many different kinds of food is because nobody really knows what the different gakis can eat, and some foods may be really nourishing to some and poison to others. So this is kept in mind in terms of thinking of the great selection. I always think this is an interesting analogy to the teaching that is offered. There is different teaching offered to different people because people need different kinds of teaching. So for one person, something that could be very helpful for somebody else could be really a dangerous teaching to offer. So what each person needs is carefully considered, and that is really one of the big aspects of this ceremony, that everybody's situation is carefully looked at and something is offered. Now there is a stand on the altar, which you will see tomorrow. There will be you'll be able to see a picture of the altar, and there's a stand that has some branches on it, and the branches are all in the shape of paper hands. And the hands are the 5 colors of the Buddha's halo: red, yellow, green, white, and purple. These are needed since there may be ghosts that don't have any hands, and they need the assistance of the hands on this stand in order to be able to take one of the treats that is offered, and again, to be able to accept the Dharma that is being offered. So the point is here that everybody is being fed and nobody is being left out. Now, when you think about the kind of care that is going into considering the different foods, and somebody goes into the refrigerator and looks to see what's there and what might be appealing and then puts a little of it in a dish, and so the altar is covered with these different dishes of different kinds of food. So when we think about the different limitations that each of these ghosts have that we are trying to accommodate, we can think about how we consider our own limitations and what we see as our own handicaps, and think about the kind of compassion that is being offered, and how can we look at ourselves and whatever we see as our shortcomings with that same kind of compassion. And that is one of the major teachings of this ceremony, is to turn the stream of compassion within and see what it is that is needed and what we can offer to help. There is also on the altar banners hung with the Buddhas of the dead. There are Buddhas of the dead to for reassurance that the Buddhas appear within hell and within death. And so you'll see all the banners behind the altar. So during the ceremony, everyone goes up to offer incense or to asperge, that is to use holy water on the altar. Some people are offering incense and some people are sprinkling holy water on the altar and on the ghosts. And the incense, the smell of the incense is to entice the Gakis to give up their delusions and to recognize their own adequacy. And the sprinkling of the water, of course, is to assure them of their purity. So all the people who are participating in the ceremony are doing both of those things. And the outcome is we are doing everything we can think of. We're doing everything that we can possibly think of and offer to our own karma and everybody else's, in order that they can recognize what it is they are putting in the way of their being able to be in touch with their Buddha nature. So this is a pretty different approach to ghosts than what we're used to, right? I mean, we're used to trying to get rid of the ghosts, cast them out, and send them back into the dark realms. But of course, in Buddhism, the dark realms are also part of Buddha nature. So how is it that we can help the Gakis see that? And how is it that we can see that the help in this ceremony is constantly being offered to us all the time? This is the same help that's being offered to us. And are we actually open to it, or are we continually turning away from it? How many times a day are people offering us goodwill, kindness, opening their hearts, and are we able really to respond to that, or are we uncomfortable with that and have kind of gotten in the habit of turning away? So I think this is a good reminder to us that this help is constantly being offered, and the hungry ghost is the part of us that doesn't really want to hear about this. The part of us that doesn't want to hear about the fact that we do have the Buddha nature. I mean, it sounds kind of funny, but really when we think about it, how many times have we heard people say, well, other people have it, but I don't. This is a teaching for other people, but it doesn't really apply to me. So it's good if you actually can recognize that, and most of us have some of that, or if you can recognize it when it comes up, that's a really good step. You know, it's a much better thing than to just say, oh, well, nuts, that's just the way I am. So the question that we have to ask ourselves is, you know, what are the obstructions? The windows and the doors are all open, and what are we putting in the way? So I think one of the things that helps us in getting a look at hungry ghost karma is being aware of some of the influences that we have grown up with that have encouraged this particular state of mind. And two or three come to mind, right off the bat. And Reverend Master Jew used to always say, well, have some compassion toward yourself and some generosity toward yourself for having picked up some of these kinds of values and influences that are prevalent, in our particular society. And so a few of them come to mind when I think, gee, how did we get here? We are, of course, part of a consumer society, and this is pretty clear right now as we are being encouraged in our consuming habits and having to look at really what some of the consequences of that is right now in the middle of this pandemic. And yet, we still need to see how it is that people can continue to make a living and have what they need to feed their families and the like. But our consumer society has encouraged us to buy more. There's a confusion between material possessions and happiness. One of my favorite stories is something that somebody told me about going to shop at Costco, which is a huge store that has things in bulk. And of course, there was music playing, and he said he has a family, so he got his grocery cart, and he was going up and down the aisles, and here there was a lot of music playing, and he was thinking, gee, we need some cold cereal. So he got to the cold cereal section, and there were these big boxes of cold cereal, and so he picked up a box along with some other groceries and finished his shopping, and he got home, and he said this box of cereal was so big that he couldn't get it into his cabinet in the kitchen. He had to put it out in the garage. But he didn't realize that while he was happily tooling down the aisles with his grocery cart. And somehow that image has just stayed with me. He got a laugh out of it. And, it's there is really some teaching in that. This is kind of what we have been encouraged to do. And so here we are with the consequences of that kind of consumerism. We also have gotten confused thinking that a proof of success is a sign of our personal worth. And so our success is dependent often on a lot of external things, which of course are subject to change. And a lot of people are experiencing that right now. And of course, the aspect of competition, which is so much part of our culture, who is best? Somebody always has to be best, and we have to try to keep up with all of this. Well, do we? I mean, that's the question. So the question is, we have to buy into it. Do we have to buy into it? Because these are the kind of delusions that feed hungry ghost karma. So I think it's helpful to see what we are dealing with, what we are being encouraged to take on board, and to understand that when we do this training, we're swimming upstream, okay? We are definitely swimming upstream, so it takes a certain amount of effort in order to be able to put out more energy in order to be able to see what it is that's really going to help. So having looked at all this, we can ask the question, where is good to start? And I'd say start right where you are. Where you are is that you made the effort to come to this meeting and hear about hungry ghost karma and about the ceremony. So I would say, and this is your touchstone. Keep coming back to what brings you to the practice and trust that. Even if you cannot explain it, even if you couldn't talk about it with somebody, even if you yourself cannot articulate it. Simply trust the heart that brings you back and let that guide you. Now, the thing of it is that what brought you here is everything that you have done in the past, everything that you think of as, and that includes things that you feel good about, things that you don't necessarily feel good about. Everything that you think of as a successful thing or as a mistake, nothing can be left out. Don't leave anything out. You'll get tripped up by anything that you leave out, because in Buddhism, nothing is wasted. We make use of all of it. It's just like nature. In nature, nothing is wasted. If you take a walk in the woods and you look down at the berm that you're walking on and you see everything, all the leaves and everything that has the dirt and the pine needles, and everything is there. There's no place for anything to go but to be right there. And that's actually what Reverend Master Jiyu taught us when she used to talk about the recycling movement. Some of you have heard me say this before, because it's one of my favorite teachings. So the recycling movement really came to life in the 70s, and what Reverend Master Jiyu said about it was the most encouraging spiritual movement that she had seen in this country. And the reason that she said that was because she said it was a recognition that you can't get rid of anything. You can only convert it. You can only reuse it. You can only find a way to make use of it. You see, the things we've tried to get rid of are still out there. The stuff we've put out into the atmosphere is still there, right? The stuff we put in the oceans is still there. We didn't get rid of anything. So now our job is to see how to make use of these things. So then she used to talk about spiritual recycling. So this ceremony is an example. It's a wonderful example of spiritual recycling. And we are doing this all the time when we are looking at, what do I want to say here? Looking at what we have on board. Look at the whole thing and see how to make use of it. You may not see this right off the bat. It may take a while to see which of these aspects of yourself, or which of the things that have happened to you or that you have done, etc., where was the teaching in that? One of my favorite images in Buddhism is the image of the vulture. So you've heard about Vulture Peak. The Buddha gave a lot of lectures on Vulture Peak. There really is a place called Vulture Peak. And according to the Avatamsaka, billions and millions of beings came to hear him lecture. These were people and things and beings, and the seen and the unseen all flocked to hear him. Now, this has been a source of great disturbance to Buddhist scholars who've actually seen Vulture Peak, and apparently it's kind of a small peak. So they're worried about how this happened. How could it be that all these beings came to hear the Buddha? Well, this is a perfect example of how it's impossible to try to understand the Dharma with your intellect. Reverend Master Hubert, our late translator, used to like to tell us that there are 84,000 parts to the human being, and only one of them is the intellect. So we have 83,999 other ways of taking in the Dharma. And that's what we're doing. And that's what we're doing in this ceremony. We are taking in the Dharma in all of these other ways that that we simply have to trust, you know. And we know that this is what we're doing, because if that were not the case, none of us would be here now. We know this is what we're doing. We know that it works. That's why we're here. So the vulture. The vulture is a bird that lives on carrion. It's a scavenger. It eats and nourishes itself with things that others have turned away from. And it has the chemicals in its own body to purify carrion and turn it into a nourishing meal. This is why it's such a wonderful image in Buddhism. We have everything that we need for converting our own karma into something that can nourish us. You know, we know how to do this. We just have to trust. We have to trust this and not keep trying to get rid of stuff. So, you know, you can think back on how many times have you gone to talk to somebody for spiritual counseling and say, I've had this terrible problem with anger. I want to get rid of it. I have an awful problem with jealousy. I want to get rid of it. Or, you know, depression, whatever it is. So you can think differently about it. Think differently about it. Okay. Some of you may remember that old Simon and Garfunkel song, Hello Darkness, My Old Friend. And I often think about that in terms of, you know, hello anger, my old friend. Because then it says, come to talk to me again. What is the anger trying to tell us? Hello depression, my old friend. Come to talk to me again. So these are the ways that we can actually listen to the parts of ourselves that we've been trying to get rid of and see what is underneath. Underneath, we can pretty much be sure that there is that longing to get in touch with the eternal. And the question is, what are we putting in the way and how to work with that? You know, see, one of the other things that's going on right now is the zero waste movement. I love that. I was just so really chuffed when I saw that. Zero waste, that's a Buddhist teaching, yeah. So this is one of the interesting responses to the grave environmental conditions that we're facing now. Zero waste. And how to make use of everything, and how to see alternatives to throwing things out. So in Buddhism, the teaching is that there is nothing that we have ever said or done that cannot be converted through the power of compassion. Compassion is greater than any karma. We still get the consequences of what we have done, but we can receive those consequences with a peaceful heart. And that is the teaching for us, that there is nothing that cannot be converted through the power of compassion. So one of the other things I would like to just stress about this ceremony is it has to do with the cherishing of diversity, which I think is such a powerful lesson right now, because this is a time when the world has gone global and the internet is bringing it to us. So we're seeing many different cultures, many different languages, many different religions, and there is a need for us all to embrace this diversity rather than get caught up in polarizations. In other words, to find the place beyond the opposites. Because it's too late to do anything else, isn't it really? It really is. So one of the thing that Reverend Master Jiu taught us was her way of cherishing the diversity within the monastic community. And this is really interesting because she had been trained in Japan, where there are traditional forms and ways of doing things. When she came to this country, and her teacher told her to bring Buddhism to the West and to make to make modifications, not with the teaching and the spirit of it, but with the outward forms, so that Westerners could practice. And we all know that she did a lot of that with translating the scriptures into English and various other things that you've heard about. She also really emphasized different postures of meditation, and she worked out a way in the meditation hall for monks to sit on the tan rather than having to sit with legs crossed. So a piece of the tan is cut out, and monks can sit with their legs down as though they're sitting in a chair. And this was revolutionary because in Japan everybody sits cross-legged, but when some of the Japanese monks came to visit and saw the temple here, they thought it was a wonderful idea. And I think she was surprised at how it was embraced as a legitimate way to sit. One of the really interesting things that she used to tell her disciples was, do not share your sanzen with one another, your spiritual counseling. She said, because what I say to one monk is for that monk only. I may say something entirely different or even opposite to another monk. And so it was an example of her taking the teaching and finding what was going to help each of us. In other words, it wasn't one size fits all, It was different depending on who she was talking to and who she was looking at. And it was the same thing if somebody wanted to do something. This was very difficult for a lot of the monks, because they would say, well, Reverend Master said I could do such and such, and the other person would want to go to Reverend Master and say, well, can I do this? And she'd say no. And they might say, well, so-and-so is doing it. I mean, actually, they better not have said that. That would not have been well received, but you know what I mean, that was the sense of it. And she would say, well, that person needed to do it and you don't. So, that was the decision. And it was just really this wonderful kind of a recognition of how different we all are, and yet we are all part of that which is greater. So this is the teaching of the all is one and the all is different. So I would like to just say this as a way of thinking about this ceremony again in the context of what is going on in the world. We have seen an incredible outpouring of kindness, of empathy, of generosity during these last months of illness and hardship and poverty and violence and fires all over the world. We've seen private citizens and governments and agencies and stores, many projects and programs undertaken to deal with the suffering that has come out of these current events. And some of these are working, some of them have fizzled out, some of them have come to an end, some of them there wasn't enough resources. People have gotten discouraged and expressed some sense of discouragement about attempts to deal with these issues. But what I would like to focus on is, again, the teaching that no effort is wasted. The effort that has gone into these offerings, whether or not they have been successful, is the important thing. Reverend Master Jiu, in a commentary that she wrote in Roar of the Tigress, Volume 2, she wrote a commentary on one of Dogen's chapters on Kanzeon, and she says, "Groping in the dark with a good heart is the activity of training stimulated within us by true compassion." I love that image of groping in the dark with a good heart. Of course we're groping in the dark. We've never been here before. That's exactly what we are doing. We are doing it with a good heart. And I think that the focus that we need to have is on the good heart, because that's what's going to carry us in the months ahead of us. That's what's going to carry us through the months ahead, and finding ways to deal with these difficult situations. And again, there isn't going to be one right way. There isn't going to be one huge solution that's going to solve everything. There are going to be many, many different ways born out of the diversity that we all have, and encompassed by the good heart that we all share. So I would like to end by reading something from the Sweet Gate Scripture, which is part of the ceremony that we'll be doing tomorrow. And this is what it says. Now remember, there's all this food and various kinds of drink on the altar. And it says, "By the power of the Buddhas and ancestors, may this food and drink will be purified. And this we offer wholeheartedly to all beings in the 6 worlds. We pray that all will partake of this offering and discard their evil, realize the true mind. We pray that all beings will take refuge in the 3 treasures and share in the merit that fills the universe. We pray that the light of the Spirit of Truth shall shine of itself and pierce the darkness of delusion." So I would like to end the talk here with the 3 homages. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha.